HIPAA secure data sharing. We're going to be taking a look today at different external devices like a Bluetooth device for a glucose meter, a surge tech device for surgery data and capturing this information while a surgery is happening, being able to look at lab results or on-site testing, and being able to share this in a secure way. We'll also look at the notifications and how we're going to provide a heads up to the user that their information is ready, or a heads up to a pharmacist or a doctor that they have a telehealth appointment, for example, from these different workflows that are going to occur with the secure data. And overall, we're going to provide you a framework to kind of think about the security and the privacy rule and how to integrate that into this process, as well as actually doing integrations to back office systems like a pharmacy or an EMR, EHR system. Okay, with that said, let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is point out notifications. Now, we have a video where we're going over notifications in a lot of detail. Whenever you're securely sharing data, you're going to want to notify people that this data is available. So one of the big things about that is looking at the frequency and the mediums for notifying the different patients or the different care providers. Now, this is going to be a really important area from a HIPAA and from just a general security and privacy perspective. We want to make sure that we're not sharing any sensitive information within the notification itself. We want the data that is securely shared to be kind of only available after someone is authenticated, so they've logged in securely and they are authorized. They have the right role to access that particular secure information that we're sharing. Okay, with that said, now let's kind of dive into a specific example. Now here in this particular case, we're going to be looking at a Bluetooth glucose meter system, and we're going to be kind of going through some of the different screens, both in the web application, the web portal, as well as the actual mobile and tablet friendly device. Now, the first thing that we're seeing here is we have a doctor who is connecting to different patients. So we have different patients who have invited the doctor to review their glucose monitoring device. This is pretty cool. So the doctor can actually see these requests, accept or reject them, and they can also go through and remove different patients once they're done working with them. If you're familiar with HIPAA, one of the things that you'll know is we want to basically remove any data, essentially not preserve data and not preserve these kind of roles and access to people's information if we're no longer a caregiver for them. And we don't necessarily want to destroy the data, we just don't want to have access to things that we shouldn't have access to. The other thing that we'll point out is as a, just kind of as a supporter, this particular person here, they have the ability to invite supporters, I should say, to be able to support them. So we just looked at the doctor screen. Now we're looking at a supporter screen. Now this is pretty interesting because we're dealing with HIPAA data here, and this person is able to invite people to be able to support them. As you can imagine, this is a really sensitive thing, and we want to make sure that the end user, whenever they're sending out these invites, that they have the ability to kind of track, we can track the data, and we can properly notify them as to what the kind of consent means, and that they are giving access to some of their HIPAA data. We also want to make sure that there's an approval process for the person that is accepting access to the data. So they need to know that it's HIPAA data and how they need to treat it as a supporter. Now, all of this can seem like a lot of red tape, but at the end of the day, there are rules in place to protect people from insecurely sharing their data and getting taken advantage of somehow. And so you want to keep that in mind as you're kind of looking at how you might enable something like this yourself. If you're going to be doing something that involves kind of supporters, consider the fact that you're going to have to comply with HIPAA still. Okay, now the other thing that's really interesting about this is this particular view allows us to basically show Tom Thumb here what all of their data is that they're going to be sharing. And so they can actually see what's going to get shared out. Now, an interesting idea would be to normalize the data or make it so that it's essentially desensitized from a HIPAA perspective. So they can actually depersonalize it, for example, or they could do something to make it so that it's not as HIPAA sensitive, and select those options whenever they're creating a support team. In this case, that wasn't the scenario that the client engaged us for, but that's something for you to think about. Now, just moving on, we can kind of see a few other screens that are pretty interesting. This particular user is able to see their sync history. So they might be able to see what information they're sharing whenever they're securely sharing this data. And they may be able to, if they want, remove some of that data from the view. So they need to be able to kind of protect their data and own their data and not have the system kind of share it just all completely, as just a general rule. They shouldn't be able to share it blindly, essentially. Now, the next thing that we want to point out about this is overall, this user has the ability to do all of this sharing and all of this kind of HIPAA compliant data access via the mobile device as well. So this is something that we want to be considering from a security perspective. What happens if their device is compromised? We want to essentially enforce a zero trust environment, especially with the mobile application, but just in general, in any case. So whenever the user is coming in and they're inviting people, we want to make sure that they have a multi-factor authentication so that they can't just have a compromised account, invite somebody who shouldn't be invited. That person then gains access to their really sensitive HIPAA data. So you're going to want to think about these kind of worst case scenarios whenever you're looking at sharing secure data. And this could be the case too if the end patient has a compromised account and we're inviting a doctor or inviting a pharmacist. So you've got to really think about kind of a cynical or pessimistic view and think about the worst case scenario and what might occur. But anyway, in this case, the user has logged in, they've authenticated, and we have the zero trust environment where they're basically having to multi-factor authenticate. And you can see that they are going in and they are sharing information with some of these different folks. They can see the user type, and they can go into detail and remove those users if they need to. They can also see what information is being shared from the mobile device, as well as drill into detail about a particular support member or doctor member. So essentially see, in this case, the email address that it's being shared to. The other thing is they can also see any pending invites and make new invites from here as well. So that's just kind of showing the different screens to be able to make an invitation from the mobile device as well. You can also see whenever something is pending and they go to drill down, they can just get a status or they can cancel the invite. Now, ultimately, the big thing we want you to take away from this whole process of secure sharing is that this can be used for a lot of different scenarios. We just went through a detailed scenario looking at a glucose meter with a Bluetooth interactivity with a mobile application, a tablet application, and a web application, as well as a desktop application, actually. So it has all of those different kind of omni-channel device types, if you will. Now, what's really interesting about this, though, is there are a lot of different loopholes and a lot of different areas that you're going to want to think about closing off to make sure that everything is HIPAA compliant. That's one of the challenges whenever you're sharing data to external resources, is verifying that they should have access to that data. And then we're also going to want to make sure that we're enforcing just basic HIPAA requirements with security. So logging all the access. One of the beautiful things about multi-factor authentication, and even more just a zero trust environment, is we can do just basic things like checking the IP address of a multi-factor authenticated user and making sure that we're not seeing any kind of suspicious IPs, any kind of suspicious activity with like pulling data out of the system or trying to pull data out of the system, and just generally trying to make sure that we are really going through a verification process that you are comfortable with, that you can sleep well at night with. And we're going to want to kind of talk through that and make sure you have all the different options at your fingertips. And then you work ideally with a vendor who can actually accomplish that. Do they have the ability to set up a really robust, secure login and authentication and logging mechanism for who is getting access to this securely shared data? The other thing from a privacy perspective is whenever all these shares are available and people can access information, we want to make sure that they can't save it inadvertently. We also want to make sure that any kind of activity that's occurring, if the patient wants to turn that off, they have the ability to do it. And if the patient wants to export any of that securely shared data, they can do that as well. So there's a lot to consider from a privacy and security perspective. And then finally, you also want to keep in mind the integration process as well. So with a lot of these secure sharing processes, we're going to be taking lab results, possibly getting details about a surgery, maybe an appointment or a telehealth visit, anything like that, prescription refill, pharmacy details, etc. All of these, we really need to be able to provide this secure information and share it, but we want to do it in a HIPAA secure way and private way as well. So just kind of think about the fact that whenever you have these upcoming integrations, they all need to comply with HIPAA. And there's a lot to that. So again, we encourage you to work with a provider who can give you kind of some of these aspects to consider and really help you go through this process and plan it all out properly. Okay, so with all of that in mind, we really encourage you, if you are interested, to take advantage of our complimentary discovery process, where we bring a business analyst team member, essentially an engineering mind, to the discussion, complimentary, so that we can talk about your upcoming project for HIPAA, how you might be doing secure notifications, and really go through examples like I went through today, and just kind of walk you through different situations, how we've handled it, and how you might kind of poke holes in your situation, in the workflow that you're going to need to set up, and really provide you with suggestions and solutions to be able to make it all happen in a HIPAA compliant way. Now, one of the beautiful things about our discovery process that we provide, it's complimentary. There's really a no hassle interaction between our team and yours, and you get to take all of the documentation, all of the resources that we provide, and whether or not there's a good fit, we're going to direct you toward the most optimal route for your HIPAA project. That's really our goal in this space, is to really serve and educate as best we can while finding good fits for our products and our offerings in the market. The other thing is, if you like this video, we would really appreciate a like. And if you'd like to find out more and see more of these videos, including our HIPAA in the news, feel free to subscribe, and we will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.